The other thing that you were mentioning is overcoming the ghosts of the past. I just wanted to put in there too that a lot of times it's not even that person. It's not even a specific experience with the person that you're having the people pleasing issues with. It could have happened, if we're talking about a romantic partner asking more of you than you're available for, it may not even, your people pleasing may not have started or even been impacted by your current partner. Welcome to the Do You Feel Heard podcast, a production of Helping the Herd. Helping the Herd is committed to empowering individuals to liberate themselves from the patterns that keep them from creating their ideal life. If you like this podcast, visit helpingtheherd.com to find resources and personalized coaching to empower you to be your best self. Welcome, everyone, to the Do You Feel Heard podcast. This is a special episode with Derrick and I. We have been doing the listener questions, and one very common theme that we have been getting is around people pleasing. So we thought, why not do at least most of our episode, or start our episode with people pleasing? And so that is what we're talking about today. Derrick, how are we this morning?
And not trying to please you with this answer, but I'm doing quite well. I promise this is authentic and not masking or anything that we'll get into. I'm doing well. Yeah, really well. I just started physical therapy for my knee and feeling optimistic. Injuries can really suck. And especially, I just love being active, love sports, hiking, being outside. So it was putting me down a little bit, but the knee's getting better, and I started PT, and I'm going to rehab the heck out of this thing. Going to be bulletproof. So feeling optimistic. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. We had an extensive sound check this morning, and I am feeling very prepared for this episode.
You are coming in clear and loud. It's perfect.
Awesome. So to start today's episode, I thought maybe we could begin by talking about what people-pleasing is before we start talking about all the things that it impacts or all the ways to not combat it, but overcome it, I think is a better word.
Love it.
So what is people-pleasing? My definition of people-pleasing is putting other people's needs or feelings or wants above your own, and oftentimes the people-pleasing comes from an assumption of what other people want or what other people need from you, not necessarily a direct request for something from them. But it definitely applies to both. But I see often with people reaching out or with clients that I've worked with that a lot of the people-pleasing comes from assumptions or projections of what someone else wants of you, and then you self-sacrifice or endure or martyr until you perceive that you've satisfied whatever it is the other person wants from you. Do you have anything to add on that definition of people-pleasing?
No, you really already sparked like 3 great topics, parts of this. I like to break things down into component parts as best I can, and kind of have a almost word cloud developing in front of me. And I really think you really nailed it with a lot of those that you already put pins in. Nothing else that I'd add. I think highlighting the fact that you can't know. I think this is the point. Highlighting that we're often doing it without knowing what the other person wants. Do you think it's any different, or is it still part of the definition? If you do fully know someone's asked for what they want and you are acquiescing to those, I think they're both people pleasing, but I was wondering if there's any distinction you have.
I don't see any distinction at the root of what people pleasing is.
Yeah.
And people pleasing. Yeah. I mean, whether, because if somebody makes a direct request, will you do this thing? If you're not available to do it and you do it anyway because you want them to be happy while sacrificing your needs or your wants, I mean, I don't see any difference between that and doing the same pattern, thinking somebody wants something. There's really not a difference. The main thing that people pleasing is putting someone else's desires or wants or needs in front of your own, like at your own to your own detriment. Like it negatively impacts you to do what somebody else is asking of you.
Yeah. When you're not available. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. When you don't have the capacity, or it's not something you can like, and this is where we get into consent, right? And this is a great segue. So I say this a lot, so this might be a tired example for those of you who know me, but when I was a young boy, consent and the conversation of consent started with, if you want to physically touch a woman, you have to get permission. You have to get express permission from them before you do that. That is consent. And that was the end of the conversation. For the rest of my life, I never heard a thing until I was in my 30s and I started doing my own self-exploration and learning about these concepts, and the door was blasted open for me, thanks to the work of Dr. Betty Martin, about what consent really is and how deep it runs. It runs into everything, not just physical touch of a intimate or sexual nature. And so one thing that I think is important to tie in with consent when it comes to people pleasing is it doesn't necessarily, a violation of consent doesn't have to be done by someone else. You can violate your own consent. And this is where people pleasing comes in. If you're not available for something, if you can't say, yes, this is something that I can do, without any reservation, I'm available for this, then you're violating your own consent by doing it.
Great point. Yeah.
Nothing on that? Okay.
No, not else. I guess I'm kind of curious what people have reached out to you for. I'm curious. I know you interact with multiple people looking for help with this, and I'm curious how it's come up, or any examples you have to kind of better hone what I'm thinking about it.
Sure. So one of the more recent and very common examples that I get or that I see is people agreeing to do things, commitments to things that they don't have the capacity to do. Oh, hey, we have this fundraiser. Can you come to this? Or, hey, we have this, social gathering and we'd really like you to be there. Or, maybe it's work. Hey, we need these things done, by this time frame. Can you get that done? And just committing, because it's easier than saying no, ultimately stemming from like an avoidance of conflict, not wanting to, either hear the other person's upset when you tell them no, or fearing like negative consequences of saying no, especially in the work capacity. Hey, we need you to take on this extra responsibility. And if you say no, well, what does that mean for my job? Is my job still secure? And rather than having that full conversation with your supervisor of, hey, I'm not available for this, like, is that an issue? Instead, it's easier to just say, okay, all right, I'll do it. And then meanwhile, you're, likely feeling resentments and regrets and all these different negative feelings because you said yes to something that you really aren't available to do out of fear, ultimately.
Yeah, well said. And I think there could be a distinction here that's important between people pleasing because you don't feel safe, like the work example. What will happen if I don't say yes? Is my job at risk? Will I be on someone's shit list? Am I, there's a lot of social and also practical concerns that I think lead to people pleasing. You see that in sexual consent, unfortunately. If I say no, will there be violence? Will I be forced to do something? You can see the through line of safety, I think, is a big part of people pleasing. And I think there's another dimension to it of, in a lighter sense of highest good, highest self, believing in yourself so much that I believe I can plan the birthday party for my friend while working extra this week, while going to my kickball league, while cooking dinner 5 nights. There's something like, I know how awesome I am and I could do all that. And is it feasible? Is it actually what I want to do all those things? Does my deepest self? So I think it can come from both basically like a light place and a dark place, a fear place and an aspirational place.
Yeah, let's explore this, because my knee-jerk response to that is the second one isn't people pleasing. I would say the second one is like maybe overcommitting or having, an inability to discern
totally
how much capacity you really have, and just being like overzealous, thinking you can do more, but you're wanting to do it. So you're doing it with consent because it's for you. You know what I mean? Like, I want to do all these things. I want to do this thing. So that to me is less people pleasing. I think most people pleasing, if not all people pleasing, comes from fear.
Yeah.
A fear to say I'm not available for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and say yes and do the thing even though I'm not really available.
Yeah, no, great distinction. You're clearly showing where I have them, mixed up in my mind. And I think that's a personal reflection, projection here. I struggle more with overcommitment than people pleasing. I'm better at saying no than I am at realizing that I'm not a superhero. That's more where mine. So that was a projection. Thank you. And no, I think you're right. It's people pleasing when you're violating your own consent. I can almost make an argument around the overcommitment because I think there's a deep, deep layer of if you don't feel safe with yourself, maybe you feel like I need to be Superman or the world will reject me or something. I think there could be layers of it like that.
The
That could
if
be
the world
subtle.
would if the world would reject me would be
Safety thing,
a fear.
a fear,
Fear.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's what
we're
I'm
afraid
saying. I
that.
think exactly. I think the overcommitment, sometimes you could trace that down to a place of
Mm.
fear, like you're saying. So it could circle in with people pleasing. But in general, I don't think that's everyone's. I'm not even sure the root of my overcommitment yet. I don't know if it's from that. Maybe it is. We're not going to get into that right now. It's not Derrick therapy hour. But
It could be.
exactly. I'm just pointing out that the root of overcommitment could deep down be people pleasing, but on the surface and medium levels, I think you're spot on. I want to focus on the people pleasing part for now,
Yeah, and I would
and it's a
say
good
in that
distinction.
scenario, that would still be people pleasing. If you're saying yes to these things because you're afraid the world's going to reject you, then are you really doing it with a full heart, or is it a full availability to do it, or is there part of you that's doing it because of what others will think or how others will feel? And if that's the case, then yes, that is people pleasing. But then I would say you're not actually fully available to do it if you're doing it from that place.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. So we have some people pleasing in a lot of different environments, and I think you're pointing out the through line being people don't feel safe to say no, or they feel a fear of something wrong if they do say no.
Mhm. Yeah, some sort of consequence that they don't want, or perceived consequence that they don't want to happen, and so that outweighs their own like sovereignty, their own integrity with themselves, because they view the potential consequence as more damaging than violating what they're available to do. And often that's because there's a long history of violating your consent and your availability, and so it becomes easier like anything. The more you do something, the easier it gets. And so if you have a long history of this type of a pattern, then of course it's going to be easier to just fall into that rather than face the scary outcome of saying no, I'm not available to do that. And I think this is most often a pattern that emerges with your most intimate connections, because you fear losing them more than anyone, and so you're more likely to people please with them. So maybe it's parental units, maybe it's a romantic partner, maybe it's a best friend, but someone who that that relationship is really valuable to you and you really don't want to lose it. I think that's most of the time where people pleasing comes up the most.
I think you're right there. And it's such a shame because the people pleasing, as you mentioned, can lead to resentment. The one thing it's one of the it's related to one of the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse that we did an episode on from before from the Gottman Institute. It's related to contempt, which I think can also come up sometimes when you lose respect for someone, you have a issue. And I think resentments are a road to contempt, one of those four horsemen. And it's very hard when you're coming from this place of love and maybe you don't realize it from this place of fear and you overcommit because it's your relationship you're trying to put into it. But if you overcommit through this people pleasing and say yes to a lot of things that you're not actually available for, and some of those start to fall through, then your partner, what? Maybe they don't trust you as much. Maybe they have resentments for the things you said you would do that you didn't. And it's just an unfortunate downfall that you can happen from people pleasing. So one of the reasons why I'm sure you get inundated with this, it's not just a, I think that's the point I'm trying to get to here. It's not just a detriment for the person people pleasing. It is a detriment for the people around them. It can be. Maybe if they are able to perfectly self-sacrifice like Jesus, and they're just on the cross all day and just shooting out emails and birthday party planning and all this, then nothing happens. But one of the reasons this becomes a relationship issue is because it also doesn't work for the other people. It doesn't sustain perpetually.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to that resentment piece. And something that I see a lot in my work is when, let's say, person A is people pleasing for person B, when person A realizes that they were doing things beyond what they were available for, and they feel that violation of consent, what very commonly happens is that resentment is then projected onto person B as if they're the reason that person A that their consent was violated. So it's like, let's say person B is like, hey, we need to do these dishes before we leave, and person A is not available to do those dishes, but person A fears what happens if they don't do the dishes. They'll go ahead and do them to people please, but then later, while they're thinking about their day or reviewing, checking in with themselves, they recognize, oh, I didn't want to do those dishes, but person B made me do those dishes. And so now person B is the person who is responsible for the violation of consent, when really person A made the choice to do the dishes. It may have been from a place of fear or avoidance of conflict, but they still made that choice. Person B didn't, put a gun to person A's head and say, wash these dishes. And they're physically forcing them to do that. But in the post experience evaluation of person A, it may have felt like that inside. Like, I didn't have a choice. I had to do this thing. And so they unjustly blame person B for that violation of consent, even when they, of their own free will, made the decision to do those dishes.
That's well said. And I'm going to use that to lead us into talking about domain and responsibility. I think two great components of that. But first, I want to acknowledge the people pleaser and the way in which, in some ways, they're very justified in this, often because of the past, which is real and unfortunately haunts us. And I see this so much in my relationship, so much in others, how often we are just relating with past versions of each other and not each other in the present moment. Maybe that's why I'm so, fixated on mindfulness. The present moment is where, the magic happens. The past and the future, while they can be great, are also where so many of the ghosts and demons live. And that's when I just see again and again, all across the board, the ghost of the past coming in, and the people pleaser in this example relating to the ghost. So maybe their partner a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, asked them to do the dishes. The person didn't do the dishes, and the partner was disappointed. Maybe they sulked around the house that night and they didn't, give the partner a kiss goodnight or something. Or maybe they yelled at them. Maybe they really had a bad day and they're like, why can't you just do the effing dishes? And that residue lasts so much longer than almost any of the positive residues that built up and the positive things that happen between those two. And it's very unfortunate. In that Gottman framework for the four horsemen, when you look at resentments and contempt, they talk about a culture of appreciation being needed, and about a 5-to-1 ratio of the things that you appreciate from someone to the things that you're upset about. How many of us really, are at a 5-to-1 ratio when it comes to our how much we're praising versus the criticisms? Hopefully more. I'm not going to project, but I'm pointing out that it's a big disparity. 5-to-1 is bigger than you might think when it comes to balancing the scales, and I think that might even be, depending on the situation, a low ball. So when you look at this and you see any past events, that's the ghost that the people pleaser is looking at, and it will have to be intentionally dealt with, and we'll get into that. But just pointing out this about the past, and then it's still, at the end of the day, it's the people pleaser's responsibility to kind of guard their domain and only consent to things that they really consent with. So can you talk a bit about either one you want to start with, domain or responsibility, and how that fits into people pleasing?
Yeah, before I get there, I have things I want to bounce
Of
off of that
course.
you shared, though. So the 5-to-1 ratio, I think that's a great point. And I think the way to at least impact that ratio is a strong gratitude practice. That's
Yeah.
something that in my household, every meal that we eat, we do a gratitude practice. And so we share all the things that we're grateful for. A lot of times it'll be person specific. So either my son or my partner will, share gratitudes about them specifically, but then also broader gratitudes like being grateful for our home and grateful for our health and things along those lines. So I think if you are noticing in your experience in whatever type of relationship that you're thinking about, if you feel that disparity and that there's not enough gratitudes or positives, and there's the focus seems to always be on the negative, try a gratitude practice. Try to implement like benchmarks throughout the day that no matter what, you're gonna say some things that you appreciate or that you're grateful for that day, and that can help to get you a little bit closer to 5 to 1, especially if it's feeling like it's 1 to 5, which a lot of times it can feel that way. Oftentimes we don't feel like we need to talk about the good things. We need to talk about the things we need to fix because we want things to get better. As humans, I think we're always striving to improve, try to make things better, to fix things that aren't exactly the way you want them. And the problem with that, if you don't have balance, is that can kind of dominate the energy of the relationship. If you're only it can feel like you're only ever talking about all the things that are wrong, and that can over time really erode the satisfaction in that relationship. So gratitude practices, highly recommend those. And
Solid
then,
point. Can I
oh, go
say,
ahead.
do a quick, if you got it, I want to
Yeah,
quick reflect on that.
sure.
Just the thing that I think is interesting here, and I don't like to get too far into the generalizations, but there's some that are really useful and important. You've taught me about the male and the fixer archetype being so common, especially in males or those with masculine energy. So the masculine fixer archetype type pattern is what you're talking about, and that makes a lot of sense to me about why then you would have this kind of negative culture because, and I'm guilty of this myself for sure. I'm not going to try not to judge myself too much here, but I'm always looking for the improvements. I'm looking around and it's just how my mind works. And I can be a little robotic about it and just like spouting out, yep, this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change. And in myself, I've cultivated quite a bit of equanimity and gratitude, and I have lots of gratitude practices and things. So it doesn't feel like I'm being negative, but I can see how from the outside, if all I'm doing is pointing out the things that need to be improved, why doesn't it look like I'm miserable? Doesn't it look like everything's wrong and the person I'm with probably did something wrong? Why else would he be trying to improve all these things? So, and I think we both, and I think you would agree that people pleasing is more likely to be found in females or those with feminine energy. I think it's more of a feminine quality overall, at least in the workplace. Is something I've definitely read articles about and seen support of, that people pleasing for women in the workplace is a larger issue than I think for men in the workplace. Don't have to get into all the reasons why, but I think pointing out that one possible dynamic is helpful as people start to listen to this and relate it to their own life and relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about that statistic specifically. I would just put a blanket statement that, I mean, people pleasing is something that everybody struggles with. Maybe not everybody. I don't like that
Yeah.
pejorative, but most, if not all people, in some capacity or another, they do deal with people pleasing, and everyone's experience is going to be unique with people pleasing because people pleasing typically begins and is like instilled in the personality of a person when they're young, when they're a child, and maybe they go over to grandma and grandpa's house for Easter, and all the family is there, and you have to get hugs and cheek pinches even though you're not really available for that kind of a touch, but you have to do it because that's just the way that it is, and you need to prioritize these people's wants over your availability to be touched, just as one small example. But it's so subtle that the adults in the situation aren't seeing the pattern that they're creating for that child because they probably had the same exact thing, and they're not aware that that's what impacted their people pleasing, or even that they have people pleasing patterns. And so I don't think it's malicious in most cases where this pattern emerges in childhood, but just want to put a caveat there that everyone is capable of people pleasing equally, but that it may impact, especially societally in our country, women at a disproportionate, rate than men because of our society, where women are, more often asked to please others at the, expense of their own availability and their consent. So just want to put that little disclaimer in there. And then the other thing that you were mentioning is overcoming the ghosts of the past. I just wanted to put in there too that a lot of times it's not even that person. It's not even a specific experience with the person that you're having the people pleasing issues with. It could have happened, if we're talking about a romantic partner asking more of you than you're available for, it may not even, your people pleasing may not have started or even been impacted by your current partner. Your current partner may
Yeah.
have never put you in that situation, yet you still feel that fear because in the past you learned that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then there's this outcome. And so what I find is the best thing for you to do with that situation is to check in with that partner and just be present in that moment before you make those decisions. So the more that you can be in the present moment, check in with yourself. I'm safe. I'm not in danger. This person does not want me to violate my consent. And then if you still feel like you have to do it when you're not available for it, check with that person. Get a real answer from them. Hey, I'm not sure that I'm available for this. Is this going to be an issue if I'm not available to do this right now, or if I do it later? Or does this have to be done right now, even though I'm not really available for it? Like, give them the opportunity to either, confirm or, contradict this story in your head that if you don't do something, there's going to be this outcome, because maybe they don't feel that way and you're just in a story from the past and applying it to this current relationship.
Beautiful. Beautiful. One thing I heard you say there, I really liked how you gave the people pleaser a tool, a way to empower themselves, a way to like check in with themselves. And then maybe I heard almost some affirmations. I'm safe. I think that's such a great idea. I think it's a great tool to instill. And I would almost even maybe offer to consider taking it farther depending on someone's situation. Affirm the ideal before you talk to your partner. Let's say you are, worried about saying no about doing the dishes. So you truly affirm, this person loves me. This person will not resent me for this. I'm not required to do this. Like, the power of affirmations is great. And I feel like for whatever reasons, I still have resistance to them. I think a lot of people do. Just a gestalt that I pick up. I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but I think it's so powerful because what you're talking about here is, that we're fighting ghosts. We're ghost fighting. We're ghostbusters around here in the mind. We're ghostbusters. And in ghost busting, there's a lot of fear. Ghosts are scary. And you aren't wrong for needing support in dealing with those ghosts. And most of the time, these ghosts are living in your own head. How do you fight them from outside of that? I think you kind of have to start in your own head, in those affirmations, those positive things. It's kind of fake it till you make it. If you affirm that this is my relationship, it is more likely to then become that way, that my relationship is one without guilt or shaming or fear. You kind of have to start on the inside first and then project that outward so that you're not projecting your fears onto someone else and then they're reacting to it. So I just really like how you're starting close and you're starting to the present moment. And I think those affirmations are at least being aware of what your thoughts are doing. They're the first step. And then maybe deciding, I'm going to consciously change that thought a little bit before I act. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I love where we're headed in this conversation. So some of these things, when we're checking in with ourselves, when we're ghost busting, as you're putting it, which I like that, I think some important questions to explore in that moment when you're about to people please for someone else. I think some questions just off the top of my head, I'm sure there are much better questions to ask than this, but what do I believe is a great question here. What do I believe about this situation? Does this person want me to violate my availability? Will this person hurt me? Has this person shown me that I am not safe? If any of these answers are yes, then it's a very positive exercise, because now you need to talk about those things. we need to get those things out in the open so that the other person can be aware of the impact that they're having on you. But if the answer is no, then that's a sign that that person is not the person that you're actually people pleasing for. You're really people pleasing for this ghost. And the fear is rooted in someone else who made you feel a certain way or make you feel a certain way. That's so hard for me to drop that
Yeah,
language.
yeah, totally.
You're
It
operating from
was
a
the
fear of
cause
how
of
you
you.
felt with someone else and how they reacted to certain things and the feelings that came up inside of you, but not necessarily with this new person. And this is another very common pattern of holding your current partner or the current person in whatever role responsible for the things that other people in that role had done or how you had felt about other people in roles previous. And so very important to just take a moment before you people please. If you can find that pause, if you're capable of the pause, take it before answering and then check in and ask those types of questions. And then again, either have the conversation with the other person, maybe not in the moment, right? Again, consent. Let's make sure that the other person, if they're like, hey, we need to, there's a flat tire on the car and we need to air that thing up before we go. Maybe that's not the right time to go into a long, in-depth conversation about your past and your traumas and the patterns that you're bringing with you. But have the conversation when it's appropriate and when the other person is available. And ultimately, that's going to create and build intimacy. Whereas ignoring those things and just going along with whatever someone else is saying out of fear is going to destroy and eventually, erode all of your intimacy in that relationship because there's no safety and you can't have depth and connection without safety.
Wow. Yeah. One thing I heard in that is that intuition leads to intimacy. We really know so much with our intuition. So as soon as you feel that something's off, and it's a practice, you can take that pause and check in with it and not ignore it. So much of our time, and I think this is one of the roots of people pleasing, it's ignoring our intuition. It's ignoring the fact that it's a hell no when we're outwardly saying a hell yes. And that dissonance is terrible. Mm-hmm. The more we ignore our intuition, the less we have a chance at intimacy because we're going to put up all these barriers and resentments. So, finding whatever it takes. And I think, I'm already thinking a lot. So we'll get to more of a maybe, an advice, like the distilled advice for some of the best ways to deal with this later. But one of these is that simply how do we build a trust in our intuition and a willingness to explore it instead of masking it, covering it up, saying yes, and we'll deal with it later. And you're just pointing out a lot of the difficulties with that, and that sometimes it can't be done in real time. And that's a pretty high level. That's why I think I've benefited so much from working with relationship coaching and working with you and learning this, is because these are like kind of high level things that don't organically happen. If you do notice something like that and it's not an appropriate time to talk about it with your partner, but you're having an insight, how do you, most people aren't going to naturally, I'm going to create a container for this later, possibly even with a mediator or someone to hold space and use that in appropriate time. And for now, I'm going to journal and use this coping technique, or not coping, I don't like that word even, this technique to note it and move through it in this moment. It's high work. So it's not the easiest thing to do. It's not natural. But what is natural is listening to your intuition. At least start there and build up a way that works for you of listening and trusting in your intuition.
Yeah, I think getting to that example that you made takes a lot of time, a lot of practice. That's like, I'm going to say expert level, but that's when you've done so much of the work. I mean, when you start off on anything, you're going to be a beginner, you're going to be inexperienced, you're going to be novice. But then as you practice and as you apply more things and you put more focus and attention into it with anything, you're going to get better. And then eventually when you're at the high level, you're going to be able to listen to your intuition and know when the right time and way to bring this forward is. But that's not what no one's expecting anyone to do that. Yeah. After listening to a couple episodes of this podcast or doing, some of the work and recognizing intuition. But that's the goal. I think it's important to have that in the back of your mind of where you would like to get to, because that's how you manifest. So keep striving toward that. And eventually you can get there if you're committed to doing it. But with intuition, in order to really trying to think of the right word here. I don't have the right word. In order to build your intuition, in order to harness it, and in order to really make the most of this thing that everybody has, we came with it. It's just, it's a part of our being. This intuition, this gut that we have. I think it really requires presence and awareness. You have to be looking for it. You've got to be listening for those things. And where I typically find it, and where it was most like, I don't know, just on the face, just like on the nose, just like, oh, here it is every time like I'm about to drive somewhere. Maybe I've got an hour long drive, hour and a half drive, and I'm like what all do I need? What are all the things I should throw in the car? And then I look at something in the house and I'm like, I might need that. Nah. And then I leave, and then almost 100% of the time I needed that thing. But in the moment, I didn't understand why I needed it, but there was a part of me that knew I should bring that. And there's that should, but in the moment, it did feel like that. It's like, hey, you should probably bring that. It would behoove you to bring that. But I ignored that because I'm like, nah, what are the chances that I would actually need it? And over time, over long lengths and periods of time, that happened more and more and more. And I noticed those connections of, dang, there's another time. Should have trusted my gut. Oh, there's another time. And so at a certain point, if you're aware of it and you're paying attention to it, you can only ignore it so many times before you're kind of purposely just violating your own intuition. You're just like not interested in it, even though there are negative impacts. For me, it's so obvious when it comes up now because I had ignored it and felt the consequences of it so many times. But if I'm not looking for it and I'm not paying attention to it, it's really easy to dismiss it as not an important, thing that I should be paying attention to or that would benefit me to listen to.
That's right.
Where do you see it? Where does it come up for you?
Ooh, great question. All right. It's just a great point that we are at odds with ourselves so much of the time. It's not something you notice until you have some presence and some experience and things like this where you get to, go through the school of hard knocks and decide and learn over time what what ways in which you're like handicapping yourself. Just love the word behoove. I can't get over it. Whenever you're stopping the things that would have behooved you. So where does it come up for me? Man, I feel like lots of areas. Oh, yeah, this is it. For me, the biggest one is with my relationship to my body. And I think that's just a great place to start in general for presence. It's one of the best places to start. How do you get present? For me, it often is by getting into the body, whether that's an anchor like the breath that gets me there and can be a bridge or anything. And it's where I don't want to be. I didn't realize this. I'm still realizing this day after day. It's still something I'm working on. It's still a growth edge for me. But as much as I spend a lot of time doing body practices and thinking about it and working in healthcare and helping people with body things all day, I have a just ridiculously strong what's the word I'm looking for? Pattern of being in the head, intellectualizing, being in the future, past whatever, and staying the hell away from my body for some reason. And it's something I'm still working through. So that's the biggest one for me is I can notice a tension, a pain, a something developing and building. I do have enough awareness, and I've done 10-day meditation retreats where all you do is body scan. Some part of me has enough awareness to start noticing when a tension's building in a muscle, or it's even an emotional thing that's building and it's aware, and the awareness is also in my body, and I ignore it. And my intuition's saying, get up and stretch. Get up and stretch for a second. Get up and stretch for a minute. And I ignore it, and it builds and builds and builds. And I can look back and I can see, well, that was really silly, and it turns into something bigger than it needed to be, or it's a lot harder to undo. And the few times I have the grace, the presence of mind to just get up and stretch again, even for 10 seconds, or to do the one motion that feels intuitive, a back bend or something, I feel better right away. I feel so much better. I was like, whoa, where was I those last 10 minutes? But at least it was 10 minutes and not an hour. At least it was an hour and not a day. At least it was a day and not a year, is where I'm trying to go for it. But that's for me the biggest one. It's that relationship to my body and those signals. The intuition that the body has that it's trying to tell me if I can just listen.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's another great example. And again, just to cultivate a strong sense of awareness requires you to be present. If you're so stuck in thinking about the future or stressing about your day and the things that have happened in the past, it's really difficult to be present enough to catch those things because oftentimes that intuition's subtle. It's not always trumpets going off in the back of your head or inside of your head. Oftentimes it's just a little like a second thought, like, huh, I wonder if I should, if that is a thing I need or whatever. Sometimes it's just that little thing, that little opportunity to reconsider or to look at something differently. And if we just, again, dismissing it, I think is often what we do. If we just dismiss it as nothing or a fleeting thought or whatever, then we're kind of missing that opportunity. So, what are your ways? And I know meditation is going to be one of them. And I know our listeners already know about my mindfulness bell. So, what are some ways that you incorporate presence and mindfulness and cultivating that awareness throughout your day? How do you come into the present moment rather than being caught in the future or past?
Yeah, great question. My first answer is not going to be the most satisfying one, but it's the way I've developed it. It is through building a consistent meditation practice that then can start to leak into the rest of your day. So for me, if I'm lucky, and this has been happening, not if I'm lucky, if I'm willful enough, I don't know the right word. If I'm doing my things, I start my day with meditation. Within the first hour or so, I'm down for, lately I've been doing at minimum of 15 minutes of meditation. And for many, I'm learning new styles of meditation to teach and to practice right now. So it's expanding. But for so many years, it was a very simple breath awareness, just noticing the breath, because the breath can be such a powerful bridge between the body and the mind, and a way you can regulate your nervous system once you have those tools. Very simple breathing techniques can, in a conversation, in the real moment, change your heart rate, change the way you're feeling in your body and your mind, change your sense of agency. So for me, it was just establishing the connection and the habit. It takes 2 weeks to build a habit, they say. So that whenever someone's hearing this, at least 2 weeks consistently of meditation, likely many more than that, likely a lot more than that. But what you're doing is, it's the same as learning how to fall. You're getting muscle memory. This is mental muscle memory. Whenever you're falling, you can't actually know how to fall right in the time. You can't process that. But if you've ever taken a martial arts class or something like judo where you have to fall a lot, you practice falling very often. In my judo classes, it was every single thing for like 5 minutes because you do so many throws in there. It was really important. So eventually I'm, my chin's tucking, I'm slapping the mat as I land to dissipate force, I'm rolling in the right way. It becomes muscle memory. This is mental muscle memory because you're not going to be able to think your way there all the time, of getting to your breath, and then that breath is a bridge to the body. So by having a consistent practice is the way for me, especially if I start it in the morning, that way I'm more likely to be able to access it for the rest of my day. A night practice is fine, but you might notice because you sleep, there's less of a translation to the rest of your day's benefits. I don't know that for sure. I haven't ran the study, but that's my intuition and what I've heard from other teachers. So I like to start my day with it so that I'm on the right foot. I have that muscle memory developing, and then as you feed into it, it grows like anything else. The few moments where you do notice and get back to the body, then, you're reinforcing the pathway and it gets easier and easier.
I love it. Making my little timestamp note here about consistent practice, because this is something that I think is the through line for both of us when it comes to this topic, which is to have a consistent check-in, a consistent I guess, yeah. I mean, practice is the word for it. I mean, whatever you want to do, it doesn't have to be meditation. Not all people, are called to meditation or like have success with meditation. Some people really struggle with it, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that meditation is the only way there. Again, what I use is a mindfulness bell. It's really simple. You can set it to whatever frequency you want. I set mine to 44 minutes. Every 44 minutes, the bell goes off on my phone. And even if it's silenced, it'll vibrate. And so I can feel it. I know that I'm being reminded of this thing. And then you can use that for whatever you want, but it's consistent because it's every 44 minutes, every single day. Or if it's, a gratitude practice with meals, it's every single time that I
Yeah.
eat. Or if it's whatever. And so it could even be as simple as, every time you feel overwhelmed, every time you feel anxiety, you take a pause. You take 10 seconds to just check in with yourself and, again, affirm, getting back to affirmations here, affirm that there's not a reason to be anxious. Affirm that in this exact moment you are safe. In this moment you are in a shelter. There's no imminent threat. No one is going to harm you right now. In the future we don't know, but in this moment you're okay. And that's something that I do if I feel a little bit of that anxiety come in, is I just have to remind myself, hey, right now everything's okay. We don't know what the future's going to be. We'll deal with that when we get there. But right now, in this one moment, as I'm taking this breath, everything's okay. So let's just settle and then let's move forward with that understanding. Because if I'm moving forward from the mindset of there is imminent danger, or there's something that's going to happen to me, that's definitely going to impact how I'm making decisions. And I'm going to be far less likely to be making thoughtful, mindful, heart-based decisions. And it's going to be far more from a fight or flight type of a place to be making those decisions. So consistent practice, whatever your practice is, just do it all the time. Do it regularly. Do it when it serves you, but do it, in a way that you're not going to go several days without doing it.
Yeah. The story of is it, man, I wish I remember the animals. It's the grasshopper and the something, or maybe it was two grasshoppers, a lazy grasshopper and an industrious grasshopper. But it was a parable about preparing for winter. And, the lazy grasshopper, more or less, was like, yeah, I'll chop wood whenever it gets cold outside, in winter. And then I'm doing it. And you have the industrious grasshopper, the forward-thinking grasshopper. Let's say, chopping, it's summer, and, the lazy one's out by the pool, sipping pina coladas, and the industrious one's spending an hour a day chopping wood for winter. And the lazy grasshopper's like, what's this fool doing? It's summer, wasting their life. And then winter comes around, it's so cold outside. All the trees are frozen. It's harder to cut. That poor lazy grasshopper is freezing. An industrious grasshopper is totally fine, fire going. You have to practice these things like falling when you don't need them, when everything's great, when everything's fine, when everything's okay, so that they're there for you when everything's not okay. I think the parable's there for a reason. It's really easy to not prepare, but the benefits are a very nice winter, a very nice winter.
Sure. Yeah, I think, if you're going to wait to apply any tools until when things are hectic, I think you're going to struggle. And this is, I'm glad you brought up the grasshoppers. I'm not sure if that's the proper parable, but I liked it. We'll go with it. I like the imagery of a pina colada sipping grasshopper at a pool. I really loved that visual. So thank you for that. But the work, and this is, again, great. Thank you for bringing this up. One of the things that I have taught every one of my clients, and everyone has heard over and over again, is you've got to use the tools when it's easy. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to use them in high stress situations. So if you're not practiced at, for instance, affirming yourself when there's anxiety, at the first inkling of a little bit of anxiety of oh, well, I didn't do this thing. It's not going to be detrimental. No one's going to die, but I don't know if I did this thing and now I'm going to worry about that thing. If you can't apply that practice, then you're definitely going to struggle when it's big stakes and you're really stressed out about it. You're really worried about this thing. It's going to be much harder to apply it. Similarly, where it's applicable for my clients is something as simple as, say, reflections, or actually, let's not do reflections because we're talking about people pleasing. Let's talk about saying no. So one tool that I have developed and that is very common practice that I apply to most people in their situations is ATS, the ability to say no without creating damage. So affirming to the person that the thing is important, whatever the thing is that's being asked of you, but then tabling it and saying, I'm not available right now. This is not something that I have the capacity to do. And then setting the time later to come back to it when you are available and when you do have time. And so being able to practice this tool when it's not a big deal. Hey, can you grab me something out of the fridge while you're up? I hear that you want me to grab something out of the fridge, and I totally want to do that, but I'm not available for 8 seconds. In 8 seconds, I'll do that for you. Just practice. Practice saying, no, I'm not available to do that thing when it doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. No one's going to be furious that you waited 8 seconds to get that thing for them, especially when they understand that you're practicing these tools and you're practicing being able to say no in a way that doesn't create harm. Don't tell them, no, screw you, get your own stuff. I'm not available. Like, that's not how to use it. And also, it's not effective to use the tool by just saying, I need to ATS this thing. That's not how the tool is intended. You have to do each step, otherwise the tool is not effective. You've got to affirm them. You've got to let them know that you value them and that their request is important and that you do want to do it. It is something that you're aware of and you're willing to do. But in this moment, you're not available. And here's a time when we can come back to it later. So that way the other person's not worrying, well, will we ever get here? Is this ever going to happen? It creates safety in the no by adding these steps to it. And so something as simple as that tool, applying it when it's low stakes, is going to help you build the patterns, build the practice within you and the other person. They're going to know that no. They're going to understand that no and be familiar with that no in a way that isn't inflammatory. It's not going to send them off the edge because you're not available, because you've been unavailable 10 times this week for little things. So this is no different than that. It's just being applied to a different situation. And that last step is so important. They know that you're going to come back to it. They're not left hanging. They're not left in what if land and in their own anxiety of, will this ever happen? And what are the implications of their no? They already know that you're going to get to it at a different time. And that's going to create that safety. And so just another great example of do the practice, do it when it's easy, do it when it's not big stakes, so that you're able to do it when the stakes are larger.
Man, so well said. Great brief explanation of ATS, which is such a powerful tool and often done wrong. That's the power of coaching, and why, I really, as much as I love that we make some of these, tools available, I can never say enough about like working with Ian or working with a helping the herd coach, because it's so easy to misapply them and to use them incorrectly. It's very, very easy, even the simplest tool, whenever you put it into actual, practice, very easy for it to go awry. It's almost like anything. Once you think you have it, but until you practice it, and then until, let's say, you try to teach it, do you really, especially then, do you realize how much you don't know or which little parts that you're missing that are actually important? So
every athlete can understand too. You're a tennis player. Anybody can buy a racket and a tennis ball and go out there and swing that racket and hit a ball and play the game of tennis. But if you're not coached by someone who is experienced in using this thing effectively, using this racket in the best possible way, then you're going to have a very different experience playing tennis than someone who has worked with someone who knows how to apply it and can teach you how to use this racket most effectively. And so anybody can use these tools. Anybody can pick up a racket, but to use it as intended or in the most effective way is something that oftentimes will be benefited by working with someone who can guide you and coach you in the ways to use this tool.
That's right. You don't know what you don't know. It's just a fact of the thing, and you really got to you answered, at least partially answered, a huge question here as we talk about this: is how does one cultivate safety in a relationship, in a workplace? How do you cultivate safety? Huge question. And some of your partial answers in that came up there were, I heard practice and play. Practice and play. ATS was a great example. You do that and you playfully, especially. I love how you coach on doing it playfully, and with something as silly as, I affirm this is important. I will get back to you in 8 seconds. Does that work? It's so funny. but you do have to practice it. And when you practice in a safe environment and things go well, you feel like you can actually do the thing. And when you play, that's also how it goes. It's a reason those go hand in hand. You practice tennis and you play tennis. And the line between them actually at the stage I'm in is actually really blurry. I go out and I'm playing with friends, but I'm also often practicing at the same time because we both know that we're oriented toward getting better for a tournament later or just for our own growth. So we're practicing and playing, and it's kind of the same thing often. And that's the same thing I think you can bring into a relationship to be really at that optimal edge of safety and growth. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that. So the thing that popped in my head around cultivating safety is, let's look at the inverse. How do you cultivate a lack of safety? You do that by showing over and over that it is not safe. That's how you cultivate a lack of safety, is multiple repeated instances of, this person is showing me that this isn't a safe place, or this environment, this experience that I have, every time I go into this environment, I don't feel safe. And over time, if you keep doing that, you're going to associate that thing as not safe. The flip side of it is, how do we cultivate safety? You have to show over time that this is a safe place, that this relationship is safe, or this person is safe, or this environment is safe. And it's almost like it's a numbers game, like you were saying with the affirmations, a 5-to-1. If you're dealing with a situation where you are coming into it feeling a lack of safety, you're going to have to overcome that with so many instances of safety with that person. That's got to be your focus, your goal, if you're wanting safety in an environment that previously or up until now has felt unsafe. You've got to show yourself, like the deepest parts of yourself, that it is safe. That's who you need to convince, is those trauma wounds that you have of, this is not a safe place, I've been here before, I know how this goes. You've got to unlearn that. And you unlearn that by seeing and trusting, giving this environment an opportunity to show you something different than you've had before. But if you're closed and you're just operating from, nope, I already know, I know everything there is to know, there's nothing new to learn here, this is an unsafe place as it's always been, maybe a new person, but I've been in relationships before, I know how this goes, and this is not safe. If you just make that determination, there's no room for a new perspective. There's no room for safety if you're committed to there being unsafety. And so I think not only leaving that space, but there's got to be a desire for you to find that safety. You have to want that environment or that person to be safe enough to give them the chance to show you that they can be a safe place for you. I think that's the most important piece. You have to want it enough to give them the chance to do it. And if they're wrong, I mean, if they show you that it's not safe, then that's okay. You now know that environment is not safe. But if you're just assuming, or you're not giving them the chance, it could be a safe place that you're kind of keeping from yourself. You're limiting yourself from safety by assuming it's not going to be safe. And so give them the chance, give them the opportunity, hopefully with lots of clear, direct communication about your past and about your fears, and like, hey, I have issues with safety. I'm worried about this not being a safe place, but I want to work toward that. So I'm going to, let down my guard and give you the opportunity to disprove my trauma and show me that this can be a safe place. I think those conversations are helpful, because if you're being mindful about that, I think it's fair to give the other person the opportunity to also be mindful about the way that you two are interacting, because oftentimes these patterns emerge when we're not being mindful, when we're in fight or flight, we're in our frontal lobe, we're just like, I got to do something. Like, that's often where these negative, limiting, unhealthy patterns emerge, is when we're just reactive. We're just doing the thing that we've done so many times, and it's just second nature. It's instinctive to respond in a certain way. And if you're being mindful, I think it's in your best interest to let the other person know, so that they can also bring in mindfulness, so that the two of you are moving forward in a mindful way, rather than I'm going to be mindful, but the other person is just going to be in their autonomic, processing. And I don't think that's going to give you the highest chance of success.
Yeah. Oh, couldn't have said it better. It's those patterns. Those are the ghosts. Those patterns that come up when the ghosts appear, the night, the dark, when people are sleeping. Why is that? it's very similar to when these patterns show their heads. It's when we're overtired. It's when we're stressed. It's when we're in the dark. We're not our most aware. It's when we're sleeping. It's really when we're sleeping that those patterns rear their heads. They're the ghosts. Those are the ghosts that we're busting here. And, unlearning. I love that word. I think it's unlearning. It's so much unlearning. And how do you unlearn? I think it's very similar to how do you learn. I just asked my best friend, Steven, the other day. He's a math professor, and he's so good at working with students and anyone. He just has such a love for learning and a curiosity. You would love Steven. And, I asked him this. I asked him directly this week. I asked him, how do you instill the love of learning in someone? How do you instill the love of learning in someone? He gave me a long answer. Should have been on the podcast. It was good. But one of the big keys was curiosity. Came back to it multiple times. I was grinning ear to ear, just just thinking about how often we on this podcast talk about curiosity. And it's so true. And I think the other part was by modeling was one of the big things that came out. Modeling that it's not, because it can feel scary. It can feel scary to not know. That's one thing I heard you saying as well, is this, there's just the unknown is scary. That's the unknown is where the ghosts are. And so how do you get into something unknown? How do you face the fear? Some of that is having lights to follow. And so when someone is able to show you that they're curious and they're learning new things and they're overjoyed with life because of it, they're inspired, they're actually in the flow because of it, and not just crying on the floor, I don't know anything, there's so much to learn. It's such a different mindset. And so curiosity and your influences, who's around you and what influences you have, can really make the difference in whether you're able to bust those ghosts or not.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Curiosity is everything. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. If you're not curious about it, then that must mean that you know what you need, everything there is to know about it. And if you already know everything there is to know, then how can you learn anything? If you are there's nothing to learn because you already know. And so keeping that open mind, keeping that curiosity, I think it's useful no matter what we're talking about. In all regards in your life, maintain an open mind, maintain curiosity, be willing to learn something new or be wrong about something. Maybe you don't know everything there is to know about it, and be willing to hear those things without defensiveness. You don't need to defend what you think you know or what you knew before. Be curious, ask questions, seek to understand more than you know now. And I think that is one of the biggest character traits of a polymath is a willingness to hear something new and explore it without having to defend against it.
A polymath. Is math actually sexual? Do they have polyamorous relationships? Math? I thought. Oh, forgive my dad jokes. Forgive them. You made such a funny one on the last podcast with Aaron that I wasn't here for that cracked me up. I'm trying to remember. You did that with where I was the ESL instead of ESP. I died. He was
I
talking.
don't think anybody got it. I don't think anybody heard it.
You went right over his head. I was over here just dying, and it's fine. He was in the flow. It's not no shade on it, Aaron, for that. It was just so funny because he was talking about how he had ESP, and you were just right, so quick, just English is your second language. I was dying. Mr. Broken Arrow. That's a great episode for anyone who hasn't heard it. I'm loving it, loving it. But I would be remiss to not admit
We do not want you to be remiss about anything, Derrick.
Not at all. That would not behoove me. Not at all. I would be remiss in, not telling people that I have lots to learn still about domain and responsibility. And our listeners might too. So I wonder, is there anything else in this beautiful web we have right now before going over there? Because I want plenty of time to talk about those. You talk about them better than anyone I know.
Yeah, I'm definitely good to shift and transition to domain. I don't have a visual presentation ready, so I'm going to do my best to draw with paint a picture with my words. Here we go. So domain is the idea that every every person has their own domain. And within that domain, imagine a circle, okay? And within that circle is your domain. Everything that is in that circle belongs to you. And there's two qualifiers that help to identify whether or not it's in your domain. So the first is things you have a right to. So you have a right to your body. You have a right to have thoughts. You have a right to have feelings. You have a right to have desires. You have a right to the things that you have a right to your voice. You have a right to speak, right? And then the other qualifier is things you have a responsibility for. And all of those things I just listed, you have a responsibility for. You have a right to your body, but you also have to take responsibility for your body. You have a right to speak, but you also have to take responsibility for the things that you say. You have a right to your desires, and you also need to take responsibility for those desires and say, hey, I do have them. These are mine, and I am responsible for them. And so that is your domain. That's everything that is inside of that circle. And there's so many other things that you can say belong in that circle. It is not a comprehensive list that I just gave you, but really the biggest, most on the nose common things that will help you understand what belongs in your domain. And then everything outside of that is someone else's domain. So, Derrick, your feelings are in your domain. I'm not responsible for them any more than I'm responsible for your body or for the words that you say. I'm not responsible for those things. I may care about those things. I may, have, a willingness to hold space for those things and support you in those things, but I'm not responsible for that. Unless you ask me to be responsible for it, and then I give my consent to be responsible for it, and then that's a different situation. But inherently, what is in my domain are things that I have a right to and I am responsible for, and without some sort of a agreement otherwise, nothing else is really in my domain other than things that fall into those categories. And so I think that's kind of the crash course on domain.
Yeah.
A couple other things to know about domain. So if I have a circle and you have a circle, so everything in between that circle is kind of ruled by our limits, what we are and aren't available to do, like we talked about. Maybe a good example here is you send me a text message, a little emoji every time that you meditate as a way to support me in some desires that I have to work on my meditation practice. And so you're not responsible for it, but it is within your limits, your availability to support what's in my domain, but you've consented to do that. And I think that's the big distinguisher between the two things is it's not in your domain, but you've consented to help me with mine. And that's how we get there, through a agreement that we make. And that agreement is made not from people pleasing. That agreement is made by truly being available for it. And that is what makes it a consenting agreement. And then the other thing that I want to share about domain is this concept of our boundary. Okay, so the word boundary, unfortunately, it's a very ambiguous word. It gets used in different ways. It means different things to different people. And so this word may not strike something for you, but I want you to imagine it anyway and use whatever word that you want. You can call it what is the thing called? Like a breaker, like when you're at like a beach and there's this big like wall that stops the waves from coming in. Imagine it as a breaker if you're someone who's been to the coast and has seen something like that. But really this boundary that encompasses your circle, the role of it is to protect everything inside of that domain. So your boundary protects everything inside of your domain. And often the emotion that is associated with this protective boundary is anger. When somebody tries to reach into your domain, often your body is going to respond with some varying degree of anger. If somebody, let's say you let somebody know that you're upset about your day because you gave this presentation and you only, you didn't get the reaction that you wanted from it. If the other person responds with, oh, that's not a big deal, you don't need to be upset about that, they're telling you how to feel, and that's a reaching into your domain. And so your response to that might be upset, a little bit of anger. Maybe it's like a 5 or a 10 on a scale of 100 of like, I don't like that response. I don't want to hear that. Versus maybe somebody's wanting to engage with you physically. You don't have that desire, but they do, and they're trying to insert that desire into your domain through, persistence, through maybe even like physical advancements that you're not available for. That anger level might be a little bit higher, especially as it goes on. At first, it might be a no, I don't want that. And then eventually it can turn into a get the F away from me. I'm not available for this. And you really have to assert that your boundary there. And that in that case is that word is accurate. But you do so with this emotion of anger. And I think it's important to understand that that's what's happening in your experience, whether you're aware of it or not. That is what is happening in the background. You have this inherent desire or this inherent impulse to protect what is yours and what you have a right to from people who are trying to impact or change or do something to what you have a right to. And so I don't know. I'm gonna stop there and then
Yeah.
send it back to you.
Thank you. No, that's great. Good old domains, boundaries, and limits. Really an impactful concept. And that was a great crash course in it. And yeah, if you don't mind me sending it back to you, I know you just did a lot, but I want to say just briefly, how do you see how that relates to people pleasing? Because it seems very, very related to me. What are some of the top ways you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. So most commonly when it comes to people pleasing and relating it to domain, what happens is we are so concerned with how other people are going to feel or how other people are going to respond or react that we reach into their domain and we take responsibility for their feelings. We take responsibility for their desires rather than recognizing that how they feel about whatever is their responsibility. They're, capable. Again, a lot of assumptions here. Assuming this person is an adult, okay? Children, it's a little bit different because there's a power structure, and to some degree, as a parent, I do have my son's needs and feelings and desires are within my domain. I do feel a responsibility for them as I'm, rearing this child. But when it comes to adults, I think it's a safe assumption to say you are capable or you have a responsibility to navigate your experience. I'm not responsible for the way that you navigate your experience. And so if I honor my boundary and I say I'm not available for something and you have big feelings about that, those are your feelings to navigate. And I trust that you're going to take them and go and process them and do what you need to do with them because that's not my responsibility to do so. And so I'm going to give you the space that you need to do that. And not even physical space, but just the metaphorical space. I'm going to allow you whatever you need to go and take care of that. And so when it comes to people pleasing, when we don't give them the space to do that because we're afraid, that fix it mentality is another big one. Oh, they're upset or they need this thing. They're asking me to do this thing. I'm not available for it, but I've got to fix this because if I don't know what's going to happen. That's common in reaching into that other person's domain is how that's happening. That's what's happening in the background is I'm taking your feelings and I'm putting them in my domain because I want to be responsible for it because I'm afraid if I'm not, then the outcome will be something that I don't want.
Yeah. Oh, well said. Yeah, that's where I was seeing it spin around there, that not being responsible for other people's feelings. Like you alluded to earlier, language is so difficult and it's so easy to say I made someone feel this or that made me feel this way. This makes me feel. And we're just throwing away our power and our responsibility for it. I mean, not just the power, but with great power comes great responsibility. We're throwing away shout out. We're throwing away our responsibility for our domain, for what's in our domain, for our feelings, and then we're taking someone's power, their responsibility for their feelings all the time. And it's really supported by the language we use. I think that's why, language is one of the most important factors to tune into as you if you're trying to work on people pleasing. It's going to be being impeccable with your speech. I'd recommend the 4 agreements for anyone who even has an inkling that people pleasing might be in their aura, in their world right now. You have to be so careful with the words because they determine where your thoughts, where your actions go, and how you relate to others. So I think that trying to take responsibility for someone else's feelings is so wild, and I think it is the core of a lot of the people pleasing. And what shocks me about it is how easily we can back ourselves into a corner and not realize that there's any other way to be. This is I want I'll run this by you. I'm going to be curious here. I wonder if you think this is a scenario that someone who really struggles with people pleasing might get into, because this is how I see it going. Someone, let's say their boss at work asks them to do this thing. They don't see a possibility of saying no. It's not that they don't feel like they can't. They truly, it doesn't even like register with them that they could. No, if I say no, maybe they make an assumption, they'll be angry with me. I'm going to be punished. They'll be disappointed. I'm going to be fired. I'm not going to get the promotion. Like, there is truly no way in which I could say no to this. That's how I think some people, especially with high levels of people pleasing, are really living in the world. Does that track with you for some people?
Yeah, I think two things. So the first is, if I say no, they'll be angry. That's definitely reaching into their domain. You inherently are able to say whatever you want to say. That's something that biologically no one's able to take that from you.
First Amendment too. America,
Yeah.
at least in
Well,
America, freedom of speech. You got it. You're,
well, I
you're
mean,
protected by the law.
even in other countries, whether somebody
Right.
has acknowledged your rights or not, as a autonomous sovereign being who is able to stand up when you want to stand up and walk when you want to walk, you're in control of your body, and your vocal cords are something that you're in control of. Nobody else can force you to say something or not to say something. You have the ability to say things, but you can be maybe not manipulated, but convinced over, a certain amount of time to not say things because of what will happen if, but that's people pleasing. So certainly they can teach you to people please, or program you to people please through trauma over time, but inherently you can say whatever you want. But the other side of that is there are consequences to your words. And so there may be a scenario where your boss says you need to do this by Friday. You say, I'm not available for that. And then they say, okay, well, then you're not the right person for this position. And so we need to find someone that is willing to, get these things done on the timelines that I need them. And that's also a potential outcome. So I want to differentiate and make very clear that just because I'm encouraging people to speak their truth and to honor their domain and their availability and not people please does not mean that other people are not going to, or that there's not going to be consequences of some kind to your words or to your decision to honor your availability.
Yeah.
I think what's important is to recognize the pattern and then make a mindful decision. So I'm not available for this thing, but there will be consequences. What are the potential consequences, and am I willing to live with them? And I think over time, especially if it's like a safe relationship, which oftentimes the example you gave or I gave of like an employee-employer situation with this power structure, that's not always the safest relationship, because power is not equally held. Whereas in a romantic relationship or in like a friendship, an ideal friendship dynamic, power should be held equally. Both people are equal participants. They're both equally valued and respected. And so in those situations, people pleasing, I think, is not the path. But if you're in a work situation where there is a power dynamic and that boss has made it clear to you that if you don't do this thing, there will be negative consequences, then you have to make a decision and weigh your options of, am I willing to endure this so that I don't have this other outcome? Or is it so important that I speak my truth? Like burnout is something that's popping up in
Yeah.
my head here, where people will overcommit and exhaust themselves for oftentimes either like a school thing, like maybe they're trying to get their PhD or something, like this high level accomplishment, or a work situation. Like that's what burnout is. Overcommitting and doing more than you're available to the point where you're just like, now I have to stop. I can't do anything anymore, and I've got there's a crash that happens because you've over committed beyond what you're
Yeah.
really available to do.
Yeah. Burnout's a great example of what we talked about earlier with resentments and how people pleasing's not victimless outside of yourself. You know, even if you are the victim, it's not victimless. Burnout's a really good example that I've tried to get multiple organizations to acknowledge and understand, like short term versus long term. You know, it has a thing. If you are having people overcommit for a certain period of time, they will eventually burn out, quit, be less functional, and you're going to have to start the cycle again. And it's not behooving anyone to perpetuate this cycle. And that's something that people have a hard time understanding. I think, you know, we're so focused on short term often. It's so much easier and simple to understand it in that way. Absolutely. And just great point about the power differentials. That is a big part of it. And then, yeah, that really truly accepting and embodying that I can't control what someone else thinks, does, and also that I have influence, and being mindful of your influence. If someone asks you, the boss asks you to do something, and you say, I'm not available, that might not go the best, you know? But if you, let's say, use a tool, even something, you know, you modify ATS for that, that is a really good project, and a really important one. You're right. I want to do this. I have this on my schedule this week. Would we be able to do it next Friday? I think I can commit to that. Would that work? How different is that? Quite. And what's the influence that you're exerting? I think it could be powerful. It depends on the boss. It might not matter at all. It might make all the difference. But that's where making assumptions really just shoots you in the foot. For most people, you do not have an intimate enough knowledge of someone else's behavior and mind to really know how they're going to react. And you also don't know how they're going to react if you empower yourself to be as influential, charismatic, just smart about how you phrase your things, how you present it. That's the area where people, and I'm sorry people, I'm really like throwing shade on people today. I'm sorry. Some individuals can, however, really get in their own way and, you know, assume they read minds, really assume that they can read minds. And they know if any form of no is given, then the world will fall. Everything is going to crumble. And that's exactly what we're talking about in this conversation, is how do we slowly unlearn some of that pattern? And it's slow. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to be master communicator tomorrow and completely get rid of people pleasing. But that example, I think, is a really good one that is eminently possible for anyone to actually, just that example, to practice tomorrow, to practice affirming, tabling, specifying, instead of it even being a no. No is a great answer too sometimes, but how often could we ATS something instead of saying no and it be a win-win for everybody?
Sure. Certainly
Yeah.
going to be better received than a hard no.
Yeah.
I love that example of bringing ATS into that situation. Yeah, great job bringing that up, because it brings it full circle to what we were talking about earlier about like giving the other person the opportunity to disprove your assumption. So you're
Yeah.
assuming that saying no, that you're not available to this work project, is going to have a negative outcome, or that they're going to resent you, or there's going to be a negative consequence. Use the tool and find out for yourself. Try to speak your honest truth. Try to honor your availability and your domain, and see how they respond. But doing it in a healthy way, doing it in a way that isn't a hard no, I'm not doing this. That's probably not going to be received very well. Versus, hey, this project is valuable. I agree this is really important that we do it, and I want to be a part of it. I don't have the capacity to do it within the timeline that you're requesting, but here's some suggestions of how I could be involved in it in a way that honors what I'm available for. Something like that, I think if you deliver it in that way and there's still a negative reaction, then there is reason to maybe have concern about that superior in that position. I don't like superior; they're not better than you. The
Yeah, yeah.
person in a higher position within that power structure, that hierarchical situation. Then there maybe is a legitimate concern there for you to have about you being able to speak your truth. But at least then for sure, because they have demonstrated to you, even when using tools and trying to approach this in a mindful way, it's still not a safe place for you to have your own boundaries and your own limits and to exercise them in a way that prioritizes your mental health. And if that's the truth about your workplace situation, then maybe finding another workplace situation is the right thing for you to do so that you have the ability to honor yourself and honor what you're available for and not, and avoid in that situation, the inevitable burnout. If you're in a situation where you genuinely cannot speak your truth and you cannot say no and you have to do what someone else is saying, I think burnout is something that you're not going to be able to avoid. Because the one thing I've learned about consent is you can only violate your own consent for so long before it becomes a problem. You can't do it forever. It's not sustainable to bypass and dismiss what you're available for. It will bubble up. It will be something that comes to the surface, and you will have to reckon with it eventually. You can put it off for a long time, sure, but we have limits. There's only so much that we can endure, so much we can take, and hopefully your threshold is low because you'll overcome that pattern quickly if you have a low threshold for that kind of martyrdom for yourself. Whereas if you have a high threshold for it, I think yes, it'll last longer, but the end result's going to be far more devastating than if you have a smaller threshold for it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the result of embodying that, of putting into practice, is a recognition of really a distillation of what you talked about with the distillation of domain, boundaries, and limits. This knowing, and I'm going to call it a knowing, I do think this is the way it is, that relationships are all agreements. They can feel like there's something else. They can feel like there are all these limits and boundaries that you can't understand and all this. But at the end of the day, they really are a series of agreements. And when an agreement is broken, there is consequences. When an agreement is maintained, there are consequences. Positive, negative, everything in between. That's what they are. And that understanding is so freeing. And it comes with a lot of responsibility. You keep coming back to that. Something you've helped us shift toward recently with helping the herd is, empowerment being a main focus, realizing that's kind of a distillation of what we've been doing. A lot of it involves empowerment. And with great power comes great responsibility. The cliches are there for a reason. The reason, they show up in these ways. And that's a lot of responsibility. And I think that is one reason why why people don't fully step into this, knowing that if it's all agreements and anything that is not working for me, I have the power to change, or to try to change, right? I don't have the power to change someone else's, what's in their domain, but I have the power to try to change it. I have the power to propose multiple things I can consent with and agree to the ones that I can and reject the ones I can't and negotiate all these things. It's so powerful. And it comes with a lot of responsibility. So it has to be worked up toward,
Yeah,
And
I
that,
had a great thing pop up. Thank you for bringing that forward. Another great question to ask yourself. We talked earlier about taking the time to ask yourself questions, check
yeah.
in, and I think a good question to ask yourself is there a clear agreement, or is this an assumption? And I agree with you completely that relationships are agreements. We're constantly making agreements. We're constantly making new ones, modifying old ones, but every day is a new, you're making a new agreement to, I think there's some assumptions that happen over time. Maybe if you're in a monogamous relationship, there's an assumption that you're going to stay monogamous, that part's not going to shift. Or if there's, conversations that have happened in the past about chores and responsibilities in the house, some of those can end up falling into the the area of an assumption, but often we're making a lot of assumptions that have never been in agreement. We haven't actually made a clear agreement about this, but I'm just going to assume this is the way that things need to go. And so that's a good question to check in with yourself if there's any level of pushback from your intuition or from your domain of I don't know if I'm available for this. Have you made an agreement to do that, or are you assuming that you need to do that? And so that can really help you determine whether or not you're falling into that pattern.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's such a good question. Is there a clear agreement, or is this an assumption? I'm written down. I'm going to try to implement. That's fantastic. Well, we don't have a clear agreement that we run for 90 minutes, but we kind of do. It's kind of an assumption, though. But no,
We talked about it earlier, so I think we do
I
have a
kind of
clear
do have a
agreement.
clear.
We did
It
have
was
a
a
conversation.
it was a bit of a bad joke. Thanks for throwing me under the bus, Ian. I know that we had a clear agreement. I'm tracking. No, but I would love to kind of wrap up with some of the distillation. I really think there's a lot of actionable things for someone who struggles with people pleasing that we can actually give. Do you mind if I go through some of the ones I noted, and then you throw in, the things I missed or what you noted that really comes up is some of these, and it's a lot. For the love of goodness, please, no one think that I'm recommending do all of these right now at once, but whatever sticks, throw it to the wall, see what sticks. I think there's a lot of actionable things that if you even picked one and you start practicing it, it will lead to change in this people pleasing that you might be experiencing. So what do we do about this thing? We really went into a lot of the things. So first, I really love, and you brought this one up, practice pausing. Practice the pause. The pause, especially before a yes or a no. If there's a question, practice a pause before an answer. And just like we said before, play, practice. Do it with some funny things, Do you want to get ice cream? Pause, deep pause. Look into yourself. Then be like, yes, of course I want to go get ice cream. Practice it. Practice the pause. And then when there's more difficult questions or work questions or responsibilities, it'll be easier. On the same vein, practice saying no. Practice saying no in a safe container, in a place where you feel safe. Again, it's probably going to need to be play first. It should probably be playful, especially if you really struggle with saying no, if you're really worried about the impacts. Practice saying no, and if you need to, really orchestrate a safe container for that. Ask a partner or a friend to play with you. Have fun. Like, can we practice saying no for a few minutes? If you have a good friend, if you have a good partner, they're not going to be that taken aback, and they'll play with you on that. They'll let you practice saying no, and then keep doing it. Along with that is asking, are you available? One of the first tools that he taught me in one of those, ask, are you available for someone before you just, do the thing. Like, I'm going to tell you all about this trauma, or I'm going to do this. Are you available? And I believe I included that one because if you start modeling that, other people might model it back to you too. The people pleaser isn't necessarily the one who needs to ask, are you available? But the people around them might, because this people pleasing tendency. So hopefully by being that change, that might actually start moving around your ecosystem. Man. And then you got to build courage to face fear. We're ghostbusting here. I think doing whatever it is that builds your courage. This is just a master one, but this isn't easy to change these behaviors, these patterns. You're going to have to build courage with whatever pursuits you have, whatever things you do in your life. Try to be courageous because it's fearful to change. There is fear there. And another thing to cultivate, there's gratitude. We talked about that a lot, that gratitude practice. I do start every morning with that still. It's just the first thing I do when I wake up. It's kind of crazy that it's worked, but I did it for 2 weeks and then it became a habit. And now for months and months, literally the first thoughts I have in my head when I wake up are gratitude. And I'm like, what a gift. What a gift, even if I think of one thing. And then the last ones I have here, language. We talked about it. Read the 4 Agreements. If you've read the 4 Agreements, read it again. Listen to it. It's a great audiobook. Do whatever you can. Because our language is how we make these agreements with everyone. So really trying to take on and being impeccable with your speech. Really tuning into your language. Maybe you journal. Maybe you journal and that helps you to see your words on paper and see how you're thinking. Maybe you talk to yourself. However you do it, really tune into that language and see what happens from there. And the final thing is just that question that you said. I'm just going to, fully parrot and praise that one. Ask yourself in these situations, is there a clear agreement or is this an assumption? So good.
Yeah, I think those are all great. A few that I had written down that I want to add to that list is staying curious. Make sure that you are leaving room for curiosity in all things that you're doing. Don't assume that you know everything there is to know about the situation or a person or what an outcome of something is going to be. If you predetermine the outcome, there's really nothing left to happen except for you to perpetuate and manifest the thing that you don't want, potentially. So leave some curiosity in all things that you do, a willingness to be wrong or a willingness to learn something new. Be open to not knowing, like, oh, I thought this, but I'm willing to hear what you have to say because maybe what I heard isn't true, isn't as factual as maybe I thought that it was. And so don't be defensive. Don't defend your thoughts or your beliefs against someone else. Be willing to hear them out because maybe that new perspective could help your perspective grow. And then presence, be present in the things that you're doing, and then consistency. I think consistency is maybe the most important thing with all of these things. Apply the consistency to every single thing that we just mentioned. Do it as often as you can because that's how you build a practice, is by doing it over and over regularly. And so if you want to integrate these things, these practices into your life and have them be just a normal thing that you experience, you've got to do it regularly, and you've got to be committed to implementing this into your life. So being curious and doing that consistently.
Perfect. Consistency is key, is a common phrase. And just came to me like consistency is the key. The more I think about it, it is the through line and one of the ones I have the hardest time with. And a great mentor told me this once that relatively recently, within the last few years, and it's really impacted me. It's really stuck with me. And he's been around. He's done a lot. The only way that anything changes is through slow, steady pressure. The only way.
Yeah.
Wow.
You apply that to anything. I mean,
Really
I look
can.
at like my health, for instance. Like if I start gaining weight, that's not something that happens overnight. That's typically something that happens because of this pattern or this routine over time happening. And then I slowly put on this weight. And then, boy, do I want it to come off overnight, right?
That's right.
I want it to go away after a week of working out, but it didn't come on over a week of eating unhealthily or not having a physically, robust practice. It came because over time, these things, my patterns and my habits changed. And to reverse that is going to take the exact same thing. It's going to take the exact same type of energy of, slow and steady. You have to be consistent and you've got to be committed to whatever that thing is in order to go whatever direction you want.
That's right. That's right. Wow. Well, it's been wonderful, Ian. It's been wonderful. I feel much more well equipped to deal with people pleasing and so many components to it.
Yeah, great conversation today. I believe you have the question from one of our listeners this week. Do you want to segue into that before we close for the week?
I do. Our final question. Let's make it a short one for our listeners. They've had a lot of patience with us going through this wonderful thing. A question from our listener this week was a good one, very easy to apply to a lot of areas. How do you maintain your independence as you become more connected and entangled with your intimate partner?
I think since this was your question, or not your question, but the question that you're bringing, you've had more time to think about it. Why don't you lead with it if you have a response for it, and then
Sure.
I'll kind of ruminate on it and add on to yours.
Sure. And coming with a lot of humility and curiosity, as most things are, something I'm still figuring out. Never want to come off as I know it all to anything, but especially this one. This is a universal question. I think intention I'm gonna also go with slow, steady pressure. Just gonna throw that one right in there while we're in it. It's true for everything. But being intentional with how you set up your life, and I'll try to narrow it down because I know that's a broad, could almost feel like a throwaway, but it's also kind of not. So what's some actionable things? If you feel like that's something you want to prioritize, maintaining your independence as you will then move into this flow with another person. Maybe you're living together and that'd be even more pressing. It's so easy to merge and to just fall into each other's rhythms and patterns. Being intentional, setting an intention to maintain your independence and checking in with it once a week, twice a week, and then acting on it with maybe the smallest action you can. Does that mean setting one night a week where you go hang out with a friend or a friend you had before that partner, and make sure you don't leave that friend behind? Make sure you don't, just, nope, I'm in a relationship now. Peace. Peace, everyone I knew before. And make sure that there are things you're doing. This is basically, it is kind of that simple, and it's not, to put into practice. Make sure there are things that you do outside of that relationship, and things to really tie it in with people pleasing. Things that are hell yeses for you, whether they're hell yeses for anyone else. I think that might be the key there. It's so easy for me to make assumptions and to self-sacrifice and not do the things that I love, that I really want to do, because I think that, let's say, my partner or whoever I might be doing something with or hang out with won't want to do it. They won't be a hell yes. Even if they're just like a kind of yes, I might be like, nope, whatever's the hell yes for you. I'm very malleable. I'll be fine. So make time and honor your hell yeses and make them happen. Be intentional with doing them 1 day a week, 2 days a week, whatever that might be. The sport you love, the show that you just have to watch, going to the movies. If there's something that's part of who you are, that is something that you think is going to make you feel free, independent, and strengthen the part of you that knows who you are, do it. It is sometimes just do it. It is sometimes that simple.
Yeah, I think that's great. Some things that came up for me on that question, I think, are important is having clear conversations with the other person. Make sure that it's not something that you're just deciding and the other person might not be brought into it. If you're in and this is specifically about like a romantic relationship or an intimate relationship with someone. And so if that's the case, I think you can't have intimacy without honesty. And so you need to be honest and clear about what's important to you and make sure that you and the other person both honor and respect that it's important to you. The other piece is establishing set opportunities. So establish within your schedule times, opportunities for you to satisfy whatever the thing is that's important to you. Don't leave it open to chance or leave it to your partner to create those opportunities for you. And then if they don't, well, now they don't value your independence. That's not fair. Do it together. Work together with that person to create opportunities for you to be able to have your needs and desires satisfied. The last thing that I want to say on that, and this is a reference from the book Polysecure. I highly recommend everybody read this book, even if you're not interested in opening a relationship to more than one person romantically. It doesn't matter. This is a great book to read, even if you are interested in a monogamous relationship, because there are a lot of assumptions that we make when entering a monogamous relationship, even though what monogamous means to me might mean something different to Derrick, might mean something different to, each one of the listeners has a different understanding or mind frame around what monogamous means based on what was modeled for them. But ultimately, what Polysecure taught me and hopefully can teach you is that you can create your own relationship structure based on the needs and desires of the people involved in it. It doesn't have to look a certain way. There isn't a set way for a romantic relationship to look or be structured. You can do it however you want. And so take the time to have an intentional conversation with whomever you're in relationship with about what's important to you, and make sure that you're moving forward together. You're going to take that step together as you move forward on this path in a committed relationship with each other. And that path has space for you to do what you need to do so that you have like a fulfilled relationship as much as they have a fulfilled relationship. And so that, I think, are the main things that are coming to my mind about maintaining independence while in a committed romantic relationship.
Fantastic. Man, polysecure. So much wisdom in there. Wait, would you recommend that even for polymaths? Can polymaths read that book?
Sure. I mean, polymaths love to learn, so there's plenty to learn in that book. So yeah, absolutely.
Hard
Honestly, I've never
recommendation.
recommended it for anyone. Anyone who plans to not live alone forever in the woods, in a cave or something, or in a cabin and never interact with humans, I think Polysecure is a great book for you to read.
Exactly. The thing I've found the most useful from it is in the first chapter. So even if you have what you feel like is a very normative relationship, and you're not interested in anything really about around polyamory, I think the first few chapters where they talk about attachment theory, they do it in a very unique way that was very helpful. They have a nested model that really involves your situations, your communities, they kind of create a nesting of attachment theory, which is really powerful. We've had a lot of episodes talking about that attachment theory in a new novel way that anyone, whether you're in a relationship or not, can benefit from. So totally agree. Great answer. I love questions from the listeners. I love this. Listeners, please send us your questions. We love to answer them. We love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Last thing I want to say on the topic of reading the book Polysecure, even if you're not interested in, polyamory, you don't have to, you could be a devout Catholic. It's not going to harm you to learn about other religions.
Yeah.
And learning about what other people are doing might inspire you to make small changes. It doesn't make you any less of a Catholic, but you might want to maybe structure your life or aspects of your life differently based on what you've read that other people do compared to what you're doing. Also, when you read that book, there are specific things in there about monogamy. There. I don't remember what part of the book it is, but it specifically speaks to all the assumptions that are made in monogamous relationships. And I think that is one of the most important chapters to read if you are only interested in monogamy. That section of the book is still invaluable. Like you will learn so much from it, and it will help you understand, oh, these are all the different ways to do it. I'm hearing all these other ways that people structure their relationship, and maybe you hear something in there that's like, I don't want that, but I want something kind of close to that. And so what you thought monogamy looked like might look differently after you understand that you can shift things. For instance, and I know we're getting really long on this episode, but maybe you have thought that monogamy meant that only one person is responsible for meeting all of your needs. And that being in that relationship means that if you have connection needs, even if it's not physical, if you're just wanting to socialize, you're wanting to interact with people, you have this belief, this assumption that monogamy means my partner has to meet those needs. Or I'm wanting to feel heard after a stressful day. Well, my partner is going to have to meet that need for me because I'm in a monogamous relationship. And so for me to go outside of the relationship to have that need met would be wrong because that's what was modeled for me. That can be really damaging to a relationship, expecting one person to do all things, expecting one person to meet every single one of your needs. And so having that conversation with your partner of what things are you available for me to get met outside of this relationship and what things are not available to be met outside of that relationship. What would be a violation of this relationship to you if I got this need met elsewhere? Because you might be surprised as to how your partner feels and what they are and aren't available for you to get met outside of the relationship. And so just have the conversations with curiosity, with openness, as little assumptions as you can make, the better.
Well said. And really ties into the people pleasing. The more you are mindful of what you just described, this idea and this, and how we want to meet our needs in this world, the less people pleasing that you're going to need or allow for. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Wonderful.
Felt like a good one, man. Thank you for being here for this beautiful conversation. Listeners, if there's any questions that you have, any topics you want us to discuss, please send them in. You can comment on our YouTube video. You can comment on our social media reels. We typically do 3 to 4 reels for every one of our episodes that we do. So comment on any of those, or you can email us at contact@helpingtheherd.com. There's really no question that's off limits. So if there's anything that you are wanting perspective on or guidance on, we're very happy to explore that here on this podcast.
Perfect. I love exploring it with you, and this was awesome. Thank you. And thank you, listeners. We are so happy to have you here. And until next time.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
This has been the Do You Feel Heard podcast. If you're interested in resources that will help you move through conflict, you can go to doyoufeelheard.com, where we have tools for individuals and couples.